in 1965, the twins, Bruce and Bernie, who invented the mechanical bean harvester, they had a shop with their father up on the highway. And it was R&D, and I don't know what it is right now. It's for sale. That building right there on the corner across from the Covenant Church. And they manufactured bean pickers. Of course, back then they were kind of small. They had a lot of 1 row, 2 row. And now they're just huge. You know, you have an air conditioner and a high five in there and everything. They're just enormous with a big cage on it for the driver. Anyway, so we have a lot of memories there. And the twins had started out in an old house, and I wasn't around for that. That was their grandma had owned that. And then the firemen came and burned it down for a project when they built the new shop.
To start, would you like to tell us your name just for the sake of the interview?
Do what?
Could you tell us your name?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Heidi Paulson. That's what I go by. But my real name is D Lane. Like Elaine with the D in front. People don't know that, but some do.
Where did Heidi come from?
My sister was 13 months older, and she couldn't say Heidi, and she'd always say, she couldn't say Delane, so she'd say Heidi, and Mother thought, oh, that's cute. So I became Heidi.
Yeah.
When I graduated from high school in 1963, I got in trouble because they went to give me my diploma and it wasn't my name, and they were a little upset. But I never told them what name to put. So when I got my diploma, it was empty. They had to wait for the new name to come through. But I tell you, I didn't take blame. And then I got married in I went to college in Indiana, down by Indianapolis. And then the next summer I got married in July. And then we lived in Clayton and Amory. And then like 1969, we finally bought a house in Clear Lake. There were no houses for sale, but we finally got one. And we've been in that same house ever since. So it's been a long time in town. And we've been married, we'll be married 61 years this July. And we were married 12 years, and we finally had a child, a son. And my husband's a twin, identical twin, and he's Bernie, and his identical twin is Bruce. So Bruce had a son, and he named him Bernie. So 10 years later, we had a son. Guess what we named him?
Bernie.
Bruce. So Bruce has a Bernie, and Bernie has a Bruce. Very confusing. Okay, do you have you want to ask me questions?
Sure.
Yeah, otherwise I could fill in,
Yeah, you can go on forever.
But a lot of these questions about youth, I don't have any there. But if you start here in the 60s, there's still a lot of changes.
We can just let her talk, I guess.
Yeah, you can
Okay. When we moved to town, there was a depot and a train. And over there by, just beyond Nielsen's, before you get to the creamery, there was a train and it went through town kind of on an angle. And I was telling you, the year they decided to tear it out, that we didn't need it anymore, the day before it went, a man got hit in his car there and got killed. And I thought, what a shame. One day.
Yeah.
But and then they had already torn down the depot. I couldn't believe it.
That's like that Pope in Argentina, like the day after.
Oh, I knew it.
He died right after Easter, after he gave a speech.
And they said he was in a coma, too.
Yeah.
So he must have gone right into a coma. Well, here we go. We're getting off track. Anyway, but stranger things have happened. And over there by where, Tire Experts and the recycling is,
Yep.
right up there along in that area where they put the fair and stuff, rides and that, there was a huge grain elevator. I know you can find a picture. It was just in the paper, either this month or last month. But they had one year I know Mr. Wood was in on it, so I don't know if it was, what group it was for sure, but they made a haunted house in there, and it was scary. And my son was gonna go in there. He got to the door and he chickened out because he heard him screaming. But they tore that down too. And there was a house there, right next in front of the Land O'Lakes, or AFP now, and that was a creamery house. But someone bought that and they did move that. They didn't tear it down. So that was good news. And I worked at Land O'Lakes years ago when we made pudding for Betty Crocker, and we made stuff for, we made baby formula, and then we made some Heinz products. And the one year I was still working there, they had upside down cans. So when you put the bottom on, that sealed it, and then you turn them over and they were pop top. Those were the first pop top, and they were only this big.
Wow.
They were just little things. Anyway, but it didn't work the first day. We had holes in them and they all spoiled. Anyway, and now I'm trying to think of the churches. The churches, of course, First Lutheran now is the sanctuary, and they built out on the highway. But the churches have pretty much stayed the same, except I'm trying to think what's there right now. There used to be like a Pentecostal church.
Yeah.
Yeah, and years ago they used to have the bus depot, and it was a house with a store built on, and that was that long narrow thing right there on that corner next to the they fitted them in. You know that little brick building on the corner? It looks like a house.
Yeah.
That used to be a gas station.
Whoa.
Years ago. Then it was a veterinary clinic.
The one
But
by
next
Paulson?
to there, pardon?
The one that's on the other side from
No, over here on the side of the street, going down. If you came down on Main Street.
The one across from the church.
Church, yeah. And in there was a big white building, and that was a church. And then they bought it, but then they didn't have enough people coming. So then it got a little musty and icky, so they tore it down. But I have chairs from there that I bought for the theater. So that if we ever have to do a play where we're at a theater, we have chairs. So I got involved in theater here in 1987. It was the pastor, Vignette from First Lutheran, and Bernice's cousin, and she had gone to college, and he had gone to college, and both of them had done drama. And she knew all about staging and stuff. So I got interested because I love that kind of thing. And my specialty, I love costuming.
Yeah.
But I love to be in the chorus. But now it's, we're changed. We were in the gymnasium all those years with that big stage. But now we moved over to the north end. The northeast corner used to be the industrial arts part.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when they left the school and came to this school in 94? No, 95. I'll bet you look out
Yeah, I think
95 it says. Because my son graduated in 94 and he never went here. Yeah. Anyway, so the theater, they had put the gymnastics up in that area.
Yeah.
But they had trouble because they needed a higher ceiling. And we didn't care, so we traded.
Yeah.
And so they have the gym. Mm-hmm. But the only thing is, we had to give up our sound and lights. So we're just going with natural acoustics right now.
Mm-hmm.
And so far, but they're working on getting a grant to get everything sophisticated. So that'll be nice. But when I was telling the kids about being in the play, they weren't even born when I started. That's how many years I've been in there. Like I said, 1987. And then I got a job at the school, and I worked in the, first I worked in the reading program, and then when we went out of that program, then I went and worked in the computer room at the elementary. And then after that, I took on the community ed. And that's where Chris and I grandma to you guys?
To her.
To her,
Sure,
yeah.
it'd be, I don't know how they
Yeah,
do it.
yeah, I know.
Yeah.
And we would have after school kids classes. But I remember for a while there, the guys would come in the old school before we remodeled, and the gymnasium was part of the cafeteria. So there we'd be making cookies with icing, and they were out there, and of course, after a while, it begins to smell like a gym.
Yeah.
But they loved it because we gave them leftover cookies.
Oh yeah.
And like 2 inches of frosting on top.
Yummy.
Yeah. But this was a very friendly community. We always felt safe here. I think we've only had one incident, and it was some steps on the back of that one when there was a pharmacy. They had a chalet up above in the back. And one time after they had gone out of business and retired, somebody was renting up there, and they found somebody laying on the ground down below, and they think maybe he fell down the stairs. They're not sure what happened. But that's the only thing that ever happened here that I can remember that was bad. Up on the highway where that cemetery is, there used to be a Swedish church there. And it was old. I sang there many times. And then they built the Covenant Church across on the highway there.
Yeah.
And there was a gas station
Yeah.
right across there on the little knoll. That was, I can't even think of the name of it. I might before I go. Anyway, that was a fun place. And downtown, when we first moved here, where the ambulance garages, you should know where that is, and you probably do too, on the corner, that used to be a gas station. And there were pumps there, and you'd pull up and they'd wash your windshield and check your oil and put your gas in for you. You didn't even get out of your car.
Is that why it says, like, on that big sign up there, it says something about oil right there?
Yeah, pure oil.
That's what
Yep,
it
that's
is.
what it was. That was a gas station. And
That
so,
same building?
huh?
That same building? They didn't rebuild?
Yeah, that same building.
Cool.
Yeah, that sort of used to be more like a Quonset hut.
Yeah.
Yep.
Stuff in
And the library, if you go downtown and on the corner is the bank, and then here's the telephone office, and there's a little brick building
Oh, yeah.
that the village uses for water. That used to be the library. Oh, it was about the size of this room, but it was so fun in there. It was just neat. And they had a little old lady working there, and she loaned me her hat for one of my plays. first time. Anyway, and I grew up, it says, where did you go? I grew up and spent my life in Rice Lake. And then I went to college in Indiana. And then when I came back home, then I got married, and we were married up in Rice Lake. But we always lived over here. We lived at Clayton first. And so then we went to all the Clayton games, football, basketball. And then when we finally moved to Clear Lake, then we started here. So anyway, but we were friends with Chuck. Did Chuck Clark, have you interviewed him at all?
We did not, but he did not come because we got a lot from him in the past.
Yes. Okay. Chuck was good friends with Gaylord Nelson and Billy Grimes, both of them. And so Chuck and Gaylord, when Gaylord came to town, he was a Democrat and my husband's a Republican. But they came over to the shop and they all got their pictures taken together, Republicans and Democrats, because Gaylord was a really special person. Oh, he was so nice. And when we named the gym over the part of the school, the elementary, the Gaylord A. Nelson, he came. And I got to dress up in the Civil War outfit from the theater. And it was really fun. We sat outside, had a little service and ceremony. And so we got to know Gaylord. He, like I say, a wonderful, wonderful person. Then one day my son came home And he says, Mom, he had a baseball in his hand, an old crummy baseball. And he goes, Mom, there's an old man over there. And they were over by the elementary school before that was all built on there. And it was sort of swampy and reedy.
Yeah.
And he says, there's a guy over there, and he had a box full of old balls. And he said, hey, you kids, I'll hit these balls, and you get them, and then if you get them, you bring them up to me. And he signed them. It was Burley Grimes.
Whoa.
But he was probably in his 80s back then. And he had come home, they still had a house here, which is just over from the back of the elementary. If you go up out of the back driveway, that first house beyond the swamp and the reeds, that was his house. It was green then and a little different shape. But so the kids all got a ball with Burley Grimes' name on it. But to them, he was just this old guy. And I didn't really know him very well. But, you know, Clear Lake, we're lucky that we had two such famous people
Yeah.
and who knows who's next.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's gonna be Haley.
Anyway, let's see, I'm trying to think of, and we used to have, down by the park there in front of that brick house, they used to mow the lawn there. It was a field, like a half a field, right before you get down to the park. And that's where the circus always was.
There's a
Then
circus.
one year they put it in the back of the elementary, out in their field there,
Yeah.
before that all became baseball. And then we used to always have the carnival downtown. That was fun. And we had to have had music and dances. And this Mr. Earl Larson that just died, he had a band. And they would perform at different places around here. So we had that too. And then the Clear Lake Centennial. I bet a lot of people have talked about how much fun that was.
Not really,
Okay,
actually.
the men grew beards. They had a beard contest and mustache contest. And the women had old dresses and the men had vests. It was really fun. And they had a lot of activities. I think they even had, some were fundraisers. They had some dances. And back then, Clear Lake Days used to be in the park.
Oh.
And you would go down there, and the Lions Club had a little, like a John Deere engine kind of thing. And they would put a box on there and fill it full of kids and people and ride them around the park. And then you get free ice cream cones. And they crowned Miss Clear Lake down there.
My
And
sister's
so that
actually
was
running
really, it was small, but it was fun. Then we moved it uptown, and then Clear Lake Community Ed that I was in charge of. One year, Chris, and then we all had the bed races down Main Street.
Bed race.
Push beds down the street and up to see who. Oh, and we had themes and everything. We had IVs and bedpans and doctors and nurses and patients, and we had a blast. And some had other themes anyway, but when they get up to the corner, they go down the main street and back up again, which is a hill, and they were just almost dead. They were so worn out, so we kind of dropped that one. But I know they've had it again since then. And we've had Santa. He used to be up at, the brick building on the corner where the spinal thing is?
Yeah.
Yeah, that has been many things. That was a bar.
It was the Rusted Rooster.
Yeah, it was a where you could go in and play games. An arcade, like an arcade.
Yeah.
And you could get pizza. And then behind there, on that next section, where that the Brickfire Pizza is, that used to be a restaurant. And we would go up there after school and have a lot of the teachers and helpers would go up there, and we'd have tea and muffins and stuff, just to have a place to communicate and keep fellowship and friendship going. We had a wonderful time. And then eventually that went out of business. And years ago, we had a bowling alley. Where the field house is, it's the sandbox now.
Yep.
They took the bowling alley out and put volleyball in there, sand volleyball. And then I can remember when the motel was going, and we used to go out there for classes. They had a pool, and we had exercises, and so Clear Lake has had a lot of things,
Yeah.
and some of them aren't going anymore, but the memories are there. I don't know that we ever had a fair here because we're so close in the county.
Yep.
But one day I looked out my bathroom window just to see what was going on, and I could see flames. And up behind where Land O'Lakes and AFP are,
Yeah.
they had taken that house out of there, so they have parking way up there on the hill. That house was on fire.
Oh.
Yeah, and I'm trying to call it in, and they told me, hang up, we have a fire. And I go, that's why I'm calling. But it would so be it. Somebody got it in there. But I don't ever remember a flood. We had a tornado one year, but it hit outside of town. It came from Forest and came outside of Clear Lake. So if you went out on A, it went out that way quite a ways. And instead of doing the curve to go to Reeve, if you went straight on that road, that's where that tornado went through. And the one man and his wife lived there, and he got injured, and he never did recover. He did die from it.
Do you know
What?
Alan and Jean Frank?
Yes.
We live in their old house. Like
Oh,
the
okay.
farmhouse.
We're
Well,
related to them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I live just before you get to Reeve on that turkey farm.
Yeah.
I live in.
Oh, I know
Mom's
where
old
you
house.
live. Yeah. Because, like I said, a couple of the kids, maybe all of them, had their weddings outside, down by the French Lakes or in the field.
Yes,
Yeah.
when my
And
dad-
Jamie, isn't he the new policeman?
Yes.
Yep.
His was right there at the cabin because they had bought Nielsen's cabin then. So we went up there for that. That was fun. But I'm trying to say, I was just going to say about another building that used to be here. But there's been some fires. Nielsen's store, the original
Yeah.
store. And they had
On
an
Christmas
old
Eve.
clock in there and an old bench. And we were coming home from Christmas up in Barron, and it was bitter cold. We don't get that cold anymore. And we could see all this pink and red and we got to town and found out it was on fire.
Ooh.
It took them a long time to get that fire out.
Yeah.
And that was a cold, awful night. And I'm looking here, legends of the town, just our famous people. I don't know if we ever had anybody strange.
Well,
But people have come and gone. We used to have a clothing store, where you said where the brick building is. If you went down to the end and it has for rent there now,
Yeah.
Yeah.
that used to be a clothing dry goods store. You could go in there and get material and scissors and thread and clothes. And on the one side, we used to have a, well, you would know because it was Eric's grandma and grandpa, Eric Wood.
I've heard of
Um,
him, but I don't know.
Clayton and Elsie, they had a sports shop.
That's my uncle.
Right.
Yep. That's
Yeah.
that's my side.
They had the sports shop.
Yep.
In
Smoky Wood.
Yeah, you could go there and get your bait
Yep.
and stuff, and you had to go up steps to get in there.
Yeah.
Yep. And on Main Street, a couple doors down from the brick thing on the corner, there was a marketplace with meat and groceries. And one time we shot our cannon, and they had a doorway that, you know how the front of a store can be straight? Well, it went in, the door was recessed, so on the side it had a glass panel, a glass window on each side of the door, otherwise it was too dark. So the door wasn't right out by the street. You had to walk in and then go in the door. And when we shot off the cannon, it broke both of those windows. Because it kept this,
Yeah.
it was like a tunnel for it. So that was fun. We had, I shouldn't say that was fun. It wasn't fun for them. But we've had lots of things. I never did see the roller rink, but I know where it was. We used to go over to Duranda, to the roller rink years ago, and the railroad. And I actually, up here where the speakeasy is,
Yep.
that used to be a mill.
Oh,
And
yeah.
they had a dock out there, a wooden dock, and in the middle of the dock was a weight, a scales, and it was inside outside. So you could put your stuff here from your truck on the outside on the dock, and they would weigh it on the inside. And I got that scales before they got rid of it.
Whoa.
I went there and they sold it to me. The one fellow who, long before Speakeasy, it was Johnson Garment. And it's now at the museum. I gave it to the museum because I thought it should be, because one side of it they painted yellow, but the other side is the original paint. It says Fairbanks, and it's Greek columns. It's just beautiful.
We might go.
So
to
these
the,
are some of my memories.
We might go to the museum tomorrow. So
Yeah.
We'll have to look
Ask
out for
Tim
it.
if it's there somewhere,
Okay.
because I gave it to him.
When I first moved here with my dad, because my parents got divorced. When
Okay.
we first moved up here, because my dad has like more custody than my mom or whatever. Mr. Reese took us into the museum and
Okay.
we walked around the entire thing.
Oh, I know. I used to be on the board.
Yeah.
I've given them some bowls that had Clear Lake written in them, because they used to give stuff away from stores, and now those things are worth money and
Yeah.
collector's items. And I thought, why should I keep them? Give them to the museum for everyone to enjoy. So, but like I say, I don't know any stories or legends, but I know about Burley and Gaylord. And it says, is there anything you would like them to remember or know? And I put that Lake was a nice place. I love being from here. My sister came here. She lived in Iowa, but we all lived together at one time in Rice Lake. And she came up here when she retired. And she left, went back to Iowa, because she said, this is your town. Because I just was very active here.
So
You
are
know.
you still part of the Lions Club?
Pardon?
Are you still part of the Lions Club or part of
No,
the
we've
theater?
retired from all of that.
And the theater
Yeah.
too?
But the twins, now they made, that was Paulson Brothers up on the highway. Then we went out to New York and worked and didn't like that because it was union and they couldn't even get their hands dirty or pick up a hammer. So we came back here and the guy who bought it opened it up and called it Picks all the beans. And that's what they named the picker. By now it would do 4 rows at a time in a field. Where, like I said, we started out with one. And then they bought Stokely Van Camp down there and became eventually the last few years, maybe 10, 12 years, I'm not sure how long, it became Oxbow International. And now they're moving out of here to New York.
Yeah.
So we'll see what goes in there next. But back along the Oxbow, before you get to AFP, there's PBO, that blue building. That used to be a shed, a little tiny shed was there under a great big elm tree. And the Boy Scouts used to put chunks of papers in there. They would tie them up, newspapers, and then they had somebody that would buy it, some company, these old newspapers, and the Scouts got money from that.
Huh.
Well, then they decided to go disband that part. Yeah, I suppose there was no need for it anymore.
Yeah.
So the firemen came and burned that shed down. And the twins bought that land because there no longer was a railroad back there. And they bought that land and built their business. And they make Civil War cannons.
Oh, whoa.
But they don't make the cannon barrels. They make the carriages and all the parts and all the pieces that go with it. But the barrels come already made from the Civil War.
Wait, what is it called?
PBO, Paulson
Didn't we go there
Brothers
for a field trip this year?
Ordnance.
I think we.
The metal building?
I think
Did you
it was
interview them or go over to
I
the build?
think we went over there for a field trip. We looked at all the cannons that
Yes,
are in the front.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
That's weird.
Oh, and a lot of the cannons weren't fireable, but the twins made some processes and some machines where they could get them, so groups that had them could shoot them.
Yeah.
So we went all around this area and sometimes out east in Michigan too, and had cannon shoots against other cannon shooters. It was fun. We'd camp out and eat out there and shoot these cannons, and then they had muskets and stuff from the Civil War.
Now that
So,
you say it,
That
they
was
do look
another
the
whole
same.
life.
I was gonna say they do look the same. Now that you say it, now I know
Yeah.
what you're talking about.
Yeah, we had uniforms. The guys wore uniforms, and the women wore dresses. And every once in a while, if we went somewhere big like Illinois or Iowa, they would have a military ball, and you could put on those dresses like Gone with the Wind. It was really fun. But now we're sort of old. There's still a group
Yeah.
there. We belong to the 1st Minnesota, and there are they're infantry, which is foot soldiers, but they made a special section for cannon shooters, so we could shoot cannons and mortars. And we used to go down to Camp McCoy and shoot, because there you could shoot a long distance. But then after 9/11, they closed that up
Yeah.
because people were scared about people making bombs, and I don't blame them. That was a harrowing experience.
Very scary.
But anyway, I loved my years working at school. It was so much fun, and I loved working in the computer room. And then like I say, I worked with Amy and Grandma. And the boys used to come, your dad, they used to come and help with the classes and stuff. We had a great time, and we would do Easter parties, Halloween parties. We had a carnival at the school, big time carnival in all the rooms, and we had raffles and stuff. So we did have a lot of fun. And something else we did, we had Bernie's cousin and his wife, they traveled all over the world. Well, when they got older and didn't want to go so far all the time, we palled up with them, and I did advertising, and we picked out where to go, and her daughters planned these trips at their travel agency. And once a year, we would get on the plane and fly somewhere. But otherwise, we went everywhere. San Francisco, Philadelphia, Washington, New Orleans, all these wonderful places. We took all these trips, and and Clear Lake, we would go down to the Chanhassen. So it's been a wonderful life. I would never have wanted a different life than what I spent here in Clear Lake.
What brought you to go to college in Illinois?
Or Indiana.
Yeah.
My church. We had a church college there. And now it's Indiana Wesleyan University. Back then it was Marion College, Marion, Indiana. But I went there, and that was a great place. And now it's really accredited. It's huge. And now you can get all these degrees. Back then it was more limited, but now it's wide open. It's just a great place. Beautiful college.
To reveal all the secrets, was my dad a good child?
Oh yeah. Yeah, they were all nice, yep. Well, I know one thing I didn't mention. We raced stock cars.
Oh.
And they had them, that's when we lived at Clayton, and Bernie lived at Clayton, and they were racing. And I was babysitting for the people that built the racing engine. And they introduced us, and a couple of years later, then we got married. But anyway, we used to have up at the shop, back when it was Paulson Brothers. You could see a stock car there all the time, because we raced for quite a few years. Then, other things take over.
Yeah.
We didn't build this and we didn't do that. They weren't in the cannons yet. And so when we stopped racing, then we made a little cannon, and that made bigger ones and bigger ones, and it made a business.
Yeah.
Yeah. One time somebody wanted, do you know what barter system is? Where if you made a dress and I made cakes, I might trade you a cake for a dress.
Yeah.
Well, they made parts, and Fort Snelling was having an anniversary, and they wanted them to make these cannon carriages from like French ones.
Yeah.
Well, they didn't want to do it, but they thought they would do it. So they put in a bid, a real high bid, and they took their bid. And so that started it. They started making, otherwise before that they had just done bartering. You need pins, I need circles or leather goods, so you would trade.
Yeah.
But then it became a business, so, and that's good because we're still in business.
Yeah.
He still goes there every day. So that's been a long time too, and that was in the 60s. A lot happened in the 60s.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. So I hope that gives you an idea. I didn't grow up here, but I feel like I grew here.
Yeah.
You know, I was not born here and wasn't a kid here, but I grew up here because when I moved to Clear Lake, we were only in our early 20s.
Yeah.
You know, and that's pretty young when you consider I'm going to be 80 and he'll be 84
Whoa.
next month.
Yeah.
So we've lived here a long time, and it's been a lot of change. Churches and buildings, different businesses in other buildings, you know, and
Yeah.
we lived through a lot of it. But you will too, if you stay around
Yeah.
here. Things will change. So, I hope that works for you.
Yeah, that was
Good,
perfect.
good.
Thank
Well,
you.
this was sure fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.